If women aren't eating, it doesn't matter what tools we're pulling out of our toolbox, they're not going to get better. When you're depleted because of undernourishment, you are wired to pick up every single threat. Carbohydrates alone can really get your body through some micronutrient deficiencies, right? It's raw energy. So if you give your body that, you don't need to be as stressed out about getting the perfect, minerals and vitamins and everything.
Hi, are you a woman? Are you a mother? Are you midlife or approaching it? Well, if so, there's a very good chance that you are undereating. Maybe you're not, some women aren't. Most women, in my observation, are. Most women are. I was for, age 12 to age 43. Yes, without realizing it, completely subconsciously. At no point in my life was I dieting. I was eating healthy. I was optimizing my health. But even when I wasn't doing that, I was undereating. I did not know how to feed myself. I had no idea what nourishment actually meant and was so confused by what nourishment meant, more confused every year as time went on, that it was only when I started tracking when I was eating about a year and a half ago that I realized, oh my God, this is not nearly enough calories. And no wonder. You guys, the reason I am so on fire about this topic is that like every experience in my life, certainly symptoms and health issues, but mental health issues, relationships, high sensitivity, on and on and on, endless. My entire experience of being in my body can be explained by the fact that I was never eating enough. So not only not getting enough calories, energy to fuel my body, but never getting enough micronutrients either, living in various states of various nutrient depletion, which of course just compound over the years and get worse and worse with time until, boom, I turn 42 and I cannot get out of bed for almost a year. Completely befuddled about what is happening to me. Why is this happening? What happened? This isn't me. Who am I? Who am I now? Can I be saved? Can I pull myself out of this? Is there a future for me? But mostly my question was, what happened and how did this happen? And figuring out that I had never been eating enough was like the key to helping me understand what had happened to me all those years. And as a woman who has always been surrounded by women, by friends, by family members, my daughters, I have been tracking this now for the last few years and talking to so many women because I'm talking about this on my podcast and on social media who are in my real life and in my online life who share their stories with me. And it's epidemic. It's epidemic. And I think so much of it has to do with our food confusion, which is one reason I really appreciate today's guest, Ashley Wulkan, who is a nutritionist, an herbalist, and a mineral balancing practitioner. Give her a follow on Instagram. She gives the best food inspiration from a place of joy, nourishment, not fear at all. No fear, no restriction. No, this one's bad for you though. Which, oh my gosh, I wish I had been following more people like her for the past 10, 15, 20 years in my online life. I absolutely love this conversation. I have never, when I'm going through and like picking out quotes to use for promotion, I have never time-stamped so many quotes as when I listen to this conversation. Like everything that is said is firing me up. And yeah, listen towards the end if you want to hear me get madder than I've ever gotten on this podcast. Not at Ashley, but at some information that she shared that just, oh my God, blew my mind. And like, no wonder women cannot win in this culture when it comes to our health and our well-being and our sense of self-perception, self-esteem, self-love, and nourishment. We're up against so much. And I have such a heart for all of the other women and girls who are in a state of poor health, poor metabolic health, food confusion, disordered eating, overwhelm, information overwhelm. Doing my best to help as many women as possible without contributing to the information overwhelm and confusion, which again is another reason I am really drawn to Ashley and her work. I love the way she uses Instagram. I love the way she shares information, and I love the way she speaks. It was so fun getting to know her through this podcast interview. So, as usual, there is an extended conversation available on Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons there. I really need your support. I couldn't do this podcast without it. It takes so much time and thought, focused thought, which I now have since I've been nourishing myself for the last few years in a very real way. And I just thank you. I feel the support of the people who show up there and say, yeah, I'll give you $5 a month because I appreciate what you are giving me through Medicine Stories. Thank you. Patreon.com/medicine stories. Ashley and I talk about maybe my very favorite topic of all time, the imprint of nourishment, what we inherit from our mothers and ancestors and what we pass down to our children. We talk about childhood trauma and how that affects later health outcomes. Ashley's story is really interesting, really unique, and I'm so grateful to her for sharing it with us. Our experiences of having addicted parents, birth order and nutrient inheritance, and the wisdom of midlife weight gain, among many, many other things. So that's there. I'm Amber, if you're new here. I did not write a script for this intro because, again, I am so moved by this conversation. And I was just I'm going to press record and start talking because I'm feeling it moving through me in a very big way. I am Amber Magnolia Hill. I am your host. Ashley Wulkan is my guest. She's awesome. I can't wait for you to listen to this. I hope it helps you. Ashley, welcome to Medicine Stories. Thank you for being here. I don't know you very well, but I was very intrigued by a post that you did. I even mentioned it a couple episodes ago in my outro. And once I did that, I was like, okay, I've been thinking about this post for months. If I'm talking about it on the podcast, let's just really talk about it on the podcast. So can we start with an introduction of who you are and how you came to be doing what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ashley, and I have been working in natural healthcare over the last decade. I always like to say, if you took the work I've been doing over this time and really boiled it down, it's really that I've spent the last 10 years just begging women to eat. So I'm really excited that we're going to be talking about this here on the podcast because it is truly the topic that most lights me up. But if we kind of zoom all the way back, I think I have the typical herbalist story. I was a little girl mixing twigs and mud and, playing with berries and everything out in the forest. I grew up quite rurally. And then I moved to the city, really just tried to fit in with, whatever the overculture wants women to be. And I didn't actually realize how much of what I grew up with was until I was in that setting. And I was the only one who knew the names of the trees and the plants and finding my way into little ravines in downtown Toronto and bringing friends there with me to look at the frogs sitting on a log. So I did my best there, went to school for nutrition, tried to fit into the sort of conventional model of that, realized pretty quickly it wasn't going to work for me. And 2020 hit. I dragged my then boyfriend, now husband, out of the city. We moved back to rural Northern Ontario and opened a natural health clinic here. Throughout all this time, most of my work has focused on women, especially really microbiome, minerals, those pieces of our health I find myself coming back to the most. And then I became a mother in 2025 myself. And suddenly it was really, really clear to me in a way that it never could have been without the embodied experience of motherhood, why women are struggling so much and how exactly we are not being served in this specific season. And, once you become a mother, I guess it's not like a season anymore. It's just the place that you occupy in society. And just suddenly laser focus on, oh, like women aren't eating. And I always understood that. And I've been telling women to eat in a clinical setting for the last, 10 years. But suddenly I understand really how deeply ingrained in us it is to focus on everybody else's needs than our own, and how we're actually not being supported in any way and being very much encouraged to pour until our cups are completely empty and given no resources or even basic education on how to fill our physiological cup back up. So that's sort of where I'm at today, where all of these tools and all this work I've been doing for the last 10 years, I've sort of put a lot of tools on the back burner. We've been doing microbiome testing in my clinic. We've been doing all of this work with all these cutting edge tools, but I actually don't care about any of that anymore, because if women aren't eating, it doesn't matter what tools we're pulling out of our toolbox, they're not going to get better. And it's actually really easy to give this information for free to a lot of people if we can just tempt them and excite them and really get them to buy into the idea that you don't need an $800 poop test. You don't need all of these supplements. You actually really just need to eat. So can we just focus on that? And can we just spell out exactly what that looks like? And this is where I think that we change the world.
I love that you figured this out so long ago and so long before you became a mother, it sounds like, because I was 17 years into motherhood before I realized I have never eaten enough. Never eaten enough.
Mm-hmm.
I can go back to my childhood, but especially as an adult and as a somewhat young mother, I was 25. I have never eaten enough, and I had no idea. I would have said, and I did say to people who would talk to me about it, like, no, like I eat 3 meals a day. I snack in between sometimes. I totally eat enough. And then once I actually started looking at it and yes, tracking, nowhere near enough food. And then I went back and put in like what I would eat in high school in a typical day. I was like, oh my gosh, how many of us, there's this very overriding idea in the culture that too many people overeat calories. And obviously some people do. But I think this is like a hidden epidemic of women undereating without even realizing they're doing it unconsciously, not trying to undereat or hurt themselves. And so I'm curious how you figured this out 10 years ago, because people are talking about it quite a bit now, but I don't think anyone was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I actually love that question, because I can take you to the exact moment when I figured it out. I was maybe a year or two out of school. I was working at a naturopathic clinic, mostly with naturopathic doctors. And then I was the nutritionist there. And people would come in for a lot of, like, we'll say weight management type of cases. As I'm sure you know, and anybody listening knows, the wellness industry is often just like very thinly veiled diet culture, in the sense that there's this sort of assumption that if you're just healthy, you're going to be thin. So, if you go work with a naturopathic doctor, holistic nutritionist, if you're going to be healthy, then obviously that includes weight loss. We saw a lot of cases like that. And I always just felt a little bit confused, because when I would go through these women's food journals, like they were eating so much less than me. And yet they had this lifelong, I would talk to them and it would go back to childhood or high school for a lot of them, just struggling with metabolic issues, feeling like their weight was a point of tension for them personally. And I had this one client who, she just sort of in this exasperated moment when she pulled out her food journal says, like, it doesn't make sense to me. My doctor thinks I'm lying and binge eating cake in a closet. And when she said that, I realized, oh yeah, like actually I think everyone thinks that. I think there is this baseline assumption that you couldn't possibly not be eating enough, you're just lying about it. And all of these women, I felt the truth in what they were saying to me. So it wasn't even a thought that they weren't being honest. Anyway, that's when I really started asking questions that went beyond what I learned in my conventional nutrition training about, calories, and everyone's eating too many calories, exactly like you said, and really started understanding the more nuanced aspects of calories as sort of a salary that we give the body, and our bodies are smart just like we are. And if you get your salary cut or you get laid off, you don't just keep spending the same amount of money forever. And your body will do the exact same thing. So if you're not putting enough energy into your body, you become this low energy vessel. And then we have these women that are exhausted and they're gaining weight, and everyone's just telling them to eat less because you're eating too many calories. And anyway, this was 10 years ago when I really started to understand why this is happening, and that the way out of it is actually just for women to eat. That part is the hard part. Convincing women to eat has actually been the more challenging aspect of this, I found.
I bet. Yeah. So let's see. There's two main things I'm thinking of here. The first is, like you're saying, when we are under eating, we are down regulating our metabolism. So everything else in the body works worse. It's very upstream. Eating enough is very, very upstream, as are minerals, which is, I notice you're an HTMA practitioner. I notice I keep being drawn to people in that sphere. And it's because it's very upstream as well. You understand basic cellular metabolism, which is what energizes the whole body, which is going to affect every aspect of your health. So when we're under eating, we're down regulating our metabolism, thyroid function, and that's why many of us do gain weight in an underfed place, even though calories in, calories out. And then also, and of course related to that, is we're not getting enough micronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting enough of the vitamins and minerals that we need for our body to run. And I mean, my whole life makes sense in light of this. And I think probably most women would feel the same way. I mean, this has been better than like any therapy I've ever gone to, because but it's been like there because I look back, I mean, from before birth, I know my mom was dieting from the time she was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And when I look at it now, she had a ton of food fear. She was so afraid of getting fat. She used the word fattening.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. I think about that a lot. We don't really use that word anymore, but that was a big word, like in the 80s and 90s. And she didn't overtly bring that into our home, but I think about how that subconsciously affected me. And then, of course, how it affected me in the womb.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, one more question about you personally is, how were you raised? Because you said that you realized these women were eating less than you were.
That's a big question. So I actually have a kind of a funny story just on how I came into the world. My mom was 15 when she was pregnant with me. And, as you said, your diet in high school, on top of just some intergenerational trauma, she was really depleted. And I came into this world, I think just the long story of my body is something that I've had to learn to just accept and love the story that my body carries from before I was able to write the story myself. And my mother just struggled. She had such a short, challenging life. And part of that was actually me watching her be hospitalized with anorexia at one point when I was at a very young age. So I think I don't know if it's my Jupiter, Pisces sun, Sag moon. I feel like I've always been able to maintain this optimism for the joy and the beauty of life. And it was pretty easy for me to, after seeing how, like, what can really happen to a body that's underfed at the most extreme level, to just know that I never wanted that for myself. So, as women in society, I think we all can struggle with our relationship with food. And I for sure felt that, but it was always important to me to listen to my body when it came to food. And I think, I don't know, I was just born to be a nutritionist. It's just ever since I was so little, I've just always known that food is medicine, from like my grandpa simmering the turkey bones for his, stew that he would make after Christmas. I just knew that there was such good medicine in that. And especially when I looked at the women around me, and we place such a, like you said about your mom not wanting to be fat, like that actually is, there's a deep wound there. Like occupying space in the world is not something that women are actually allowed to do without shame. And just seeing the physical ramifications of that inner battle in my friends, family members, the women that I worked with in clinic, I just always knew, like, no one told me, but I just always knew my inner compass was just keep eating, figure the rest out. If you run out of energy, you can't do anything here. So it's really important that you just maintain your energy. Yeah. So I think that there's times when we inherited something from our family, and there's times when we just came in with our own soul knowing. And when it comes to food, I think that's just something I've always carried with me, sort of despite the circumstances.
I love when, when people just come through knowing, and you have obviously built your career, your work on your own observations.
Yeah.
I'm sure as well as your training and learning from other people, but I think that's maybe actually kind of rare. Like a lot of people just take in what they're told and what they learn from others, but I respect that so much. And even just this idea that you just touched on, which is so basic, that you need to keep fueling. I never thought of food as fuel. The only way I thought of food until just a couple years ago was as something to do. Eating was something to do to stave off the feeling of hunger, which is getting in the way of me doing what I actually want to do in my life. And I was recently watching someone very close to me eat, and I've been tracking for years now that she doesn't eat enough nearly at all either. And I noticed she eats just enough at a meal to stop feeling hungry. And for her, the meal is done when that happens. And I was like, oh, that's also what I did for years. And so slowly building up my caloric intake over time, now I know I'm not eating till I'm uncomfortably full. But even when that hunger signal goes away, I keep eating because I'm not eating to not be hungry for the moment. I'm eating to fuel my body. And I literally didn't realize that until my early 40s.
Wow. And that's what you said earlier, not like this is the best therapy I've ever done or something was the words you used. And you were referring to just the feeling of being adequately nourished.
And of making sense of my life. Looking at food intake throughout my life makes so many of my experiences of being in my own body make sense.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I want to get to this post now. I'm just going to go through and read each slide, and then we can go into them one by one. But there were a few things in this post that I was like, yep, that's me. That's my life. My life just, this is where I was for so long. So first of all, you're using the adorable Beatrix Potter illustration.
The queen, our queen.
And this post, it seems like it went pretty viral. Like, yeah, a lot of women resonated with this post, myself very much included.
Yeah.
So, hey mama, I trust in your subjective experience of reality, but also I noticed you haven't eaten anything yet today. Yes, motherhood is exhausting. Also, have you eaten lunch? I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid. I'm just saying research shows just 1.3% dehydration in women worsens mood, and all you've had today is coffee. Hey mama, I've noticed you keep confusing your low blood sugar anxiety with intuition. I'm not saying running away to a cabin in the woods won't solve your problems. I'm just saying once you get there, you'll still have to cook 3 meals a day. Yes, your family is too loud. Also, auditory overwhelm increases with low protein intake. I'm not saying you aren't overstimulated and touched out by bedtime. I'm just saying undereating also feels like that.
Yeah. I wrote that while my baby was contact napping on me because I had received an influx of comments on a recent post, probably about breastfeeding nutrition or something, of women telling me that they don't have time to eat or they can't eat or, for whatever reason. And I understand everyone wants to know that their heart is hard and be heard. But also, I was like, how can I make it like fun and cute and cheeky for women to really understand that this isn't like an extra thing on top of everything else you have going on. This is the floor underneath you. And how can I say that in a way that's going to resonate and not ruffle feathers and, all the things that we have to think about when we're on the internet. So I'm really happy to hear that it landed and it did that. And I'm curious to know, what about that? Like, what stood out the most to you? Because when you shared it, you had some really beautiful things to say. And I would love to dive in a little bit more into your part of that story. Like, what stood out the most to you there?
Yeah, I mean, this set me off. I don't post
Yeah.
that often on Instagram. I don't go off in stories that often. And I didn't even plan to when I first shared it in my stories. And I was like, oh, I'll do a little follow-up story of my reflections. And I'm like, oh, and this is what I mean about it being like therapy for me. Looking back on my life under eating is because, when something just like touches you and you cry because you're like, oh, that's like something deep in me.
True.
That has happened to me over and over on this
Mm.
nourishing myself healing journey. So the one slide on here that really, really interests me is confusing low blood sugar anxiety with intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So before I say what that means to me, I want to know what that means to you.
Yeah. I mean, at the most basic level, I just see women frozen in this state of severe anxiety because their bodies are in literal physiological crisis. And then, that anxiety is, oh, but what if that's like a message from the universe? And I have to really honor that. And then also there's actually a higher layer of that for me, which is that I am the first woman in my lineage to not be disabled by mental illness. And I came from a long line of women who, my mother had her own stuff with food. What you said about your own experience with food being sort of like eating to live, not living to eat, I guess. Like, you were just like, how can I quickly get rid of this inconvenient biological need that I have, right? So my grandmother is so much like that as well. I see that in her so much. And I really feel like one of the ways that I have protected myself, and I know we love HTMA talk, and we could always talk about copper and mental health and all of those parts too. But I think just at the most basic level, eating enough has protected me from that whole spiral of like psychiatric imbalance, which now in the modern era of the wellness world and the herbalist sphere especially is sort of this like getting messages from the universe and, however you want to word it, when you don't have adequate boundaries up because you don't have the right nutrients that are boundarying you, you do get this like, maybe it's my intuition or maybe it's my mental illness or whatever avenue you want to pull from. It's definitely not you and it's not healthy is the most important takeaway.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
exactly. Like for decades, I identified as a highly sensitive person. And I am certainly a very thoughtful and introspective person, but a lot of those symptoms, is how I see them now, have gone away since I've nourished myself. I am not super overwhelmed all the time. I am not like nervous system state. The thing about low protein and auditory overwhelm, I mean, I always said like auditory overwhelm is my main symptom of being a highly sensitive person. I just can't be in spaces with cacophonous noise. I just thought that was like innate to me. I was definitely under eating protein my entire life. I became a
and you were vegan,
vegetarian.
right?
Yes,
So
I
that
became
was
vegetarian at 12. I wanted to become vegetarian at 8. My parents were like, no. And then once I turned 12, I was like, oh, it's not really your decision anymore, is it? And so I did become vegetarian and then vegan at 17 through my first postpartum period at 26.
Wow. Yeah.
So for sure, low protein my whole life.
Yeah, and just taurine and glycine alone, like those amino acids, even if we're not talking about grams of protein, because sure, you could hit enough grams of protein on a vegan diet, but just the specific amino acids that are actually like inhibitory neurotransmitters that help you deal with auditory overwhelm and just stimulation in the environment in general. So yeah, I can absolutely see how looking back at all of this, your life would start to come into focus and make a lot more sense.
Realizing that I had been running on empty my entire life caused a cascade of epiphanies for me. one of which was that I had been drawn to herbal medicine at a young age because of the profound benefits that it had for my nervous system. It's what led me to study with the wise, warm women I learned from 2 decades ago, and why I was drawn to herbal body oiling and nervine herbs especially. I mean, my lifelong lack of calcium just had my nervous system exposed at all times. I was just a live wire. I hadn't figured out how undernourished I was back then, and the plants were the only thing I had tried that brought relief. The Mythic Medicine line of plant remedies was born out of my own depletion as a young mother recovering from veganism. My husband Owen and I grow most of the herbs right here on our Northern California land, and we craft the medicines ourselves in small batches. Everything is organic. We've been doing this work for 14 years now, and it's truly a labor of love. Caring for the plants, making the remedies, and sending them out to support women like you. If you'd like herbal nourishment for your nervous system, sleep, immunity, and overall well-being, you can visit mythicmedicine.shop to check our offerings out. Our customer Kate recently left this review on our St. John's wort herbal oil. I use these oils to calm me down at the end of the night, and they work amazingly. My daughter has a genetic condition where her legs hurt and get inflamed. The oil helps calm the inflammation and soothe her. And this is why we do it. We do it for everyday family, self-care, caring for children, making it a ritual, making it a moment of connection, and again, just wrapping everyone's nervous systems in an envelope of calming, warming herbal goodness. As always, thank you for supporting our small family-run business. And I talked about this more in depth 2 episodes ago on the interview with Sina Maria, but just constantly thinking the universe is sending me signs and signals. And for me, somehow, even I did have a lot of anxiety and some huge anxiety attacks when I was about 19, but for most of my life, anxiety hasn't been so much of a problem for me. But I can see how if your low nutrient stores are putting you in a state of anxiety, and I've seen this in so many people I know, you are like, oh, that's no, I'm not going to sign my child up for that program because that person felt weird to me. Or, you're misperceiving life. You are misperceiving the cues that life is giving you when you're in an undernourished state. That's going to look different for everyone. But what feels like a hit of intuition or a divine download to you is probably not when you're in that undernourished state.
Yeah, you are primed to read everything as a threat when your physiological needs aren't met, because your body could never understand a reason why you wouldn't be meeting your needs if there was no threat, right? It's actually this really intelligent mechanism. And I think about that all the time with the HSP stuff throughout the years. I think just the type of work that I do really resonates with that type of person. And they're not eating, not just not enough. A lot of the time they aren't eating at all. They'll tell you, I'm doing all the things. I'm making these herbal infusions. I start my day with this cacao and I put all these herbs. And okay, but where are the calories though, right? It's almost and I shouldn't say they. I mean, I think we've all been there. So I hope this isn't coming off as judgmental or anything. But you get addicted to almost that feeling of being this light fairy who's barely inhabiting this dimension. And it's almost like you're high on that. And they will often report oh, I don't want to eat that. I don't like eating in the morning, or I don't like eating too much protein. It makes me feel so heavy. That heaviness is gravity. That heaviness is pulling you back down to your womb. That heaviness is actually the metric of success that I want to use for this protocol that I've given you. I don't want you up in the ethers, right? You can't access anything relevant to the human experience when you're out there. We need you down here in this blood and bones and goo body of yours. And this is what needs your attention now.
I've told this story before, but I feel like I have to tell it again. This is probably 15 years ago or so. I met this woman about my age. She didn't have her toddler with her, but she talked about having a toddler and that she was fruitarian. And even at that stage, I knew fruitarian was way too far. I had known enough raw foodists and fruitarians by my early 20s to be like, these people are not okay. About a week after meeting her, I pulled into the parking lot of our food co-op here. I was walking up to the front of the co-op. I saw her standing. There's like a sort of a little, out front space where people congregate and can sit and eat food and stuff. And I saw her over there, but she wasn't really facing me. And I saw her toddler toddling toward the parking lot, start to step over one of the little bumps that your front tires hit when you pull in, as a car was about to pull into that same spot. And I ran and I scooped the toddler up and brought him over to her. And I don't think I said anything about the fruitarianism, but in my mind, I was like, eat some fucking food and come back down to earth. You are not paying attention. A parking lot is one of the most dangerous places in a town, in a city, and your baby was about to go toddling into one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I see this whole conversation. It really moves me. A lot of energy moving through my body. And she was, oh my gosh, I mean, she has one of those crazy hippie names, that she gave herself, one of those.
Yeah.
That's what made me think of it. One of those very light, I want to be a fairy. I'm living in this town where people don't eat because they're all on their spiritual journeys and doing their ayahuasca ceremonies.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to, because I want to say that I very often had the thought that if I could choose to never have to eat again, but it also meant I never could eat again. Like I would never experience the pleasure of food or tastes. I would absolutely take that because it was way too much work to feed myself that many times a day. And it is. I'm doing it now. And it is like, it's a lot. 3 full meals a day, planning it, thinking about it, making sure you get enough nutrients. It's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's like the whole point. Like our bodies primarily interact with our environment through food. If we boil it down, medicine stories, like what it is to be human upon the earth. If we boil down what it is to be human upon the earth, it is literally to eat, right? To intake and to excrete. That is actually all that we are here for. It's how our body knows how it's oriented in space and time. It's our microbiome communicating, getting signals, like everything hinges upon that. So you're not the first woman who said that to me. I actually hear that a lot from women. And my response is always, I think we're very lost then, because what is it that we're here for if not to occupy these bodies and this environment? Like, what is the thing that existing physically is distracting us from? And perhaps is that maybe less important? Like the post that you referenced, when I wrote it, was coming from a place of, if you have time to scroll on Instagram to the point where you're no longer seeing content from the people you actually follow, and you're getting my like breastfeeding nutrition post that you don't even follow me, and you have time to read it and then tell me that you don't have time to eat, you could have texted your husband to bring you like some cheese and crackers if you're nap trapped under a baby. You could have gone to the fridge. You could have had a spoonful of honey, thrown a pinch of salt in your water. We could have found a way to get some nourishment in you during the time that you were telling this story about how it's impossible for you to be nourished. We just need to believe that it's important. And the other part of this for me is also getting women excited about it, because food is like the ultimate pleasure. And hearing that you would just forego it, like, oh no, like at the soul level, like I want to give you like the coziest pot of stew that's been made with so much love. And I know that when you take a bite of that, you wouldn't think like, I don't need this. I could do without this, right? It's just maybe you're not getting the right nourishment. Maybe we've forgotten what it is to eat food that is made with so much love that it lights us up. There's actually research showing that we absorb more nutrition from meals that we really enjoy. So I think that that's a really important part of the nourishment picture when we talk about this, is finding our way back to the pleasure of eating again.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about being in that mind state, yeah, it's like I want to be completely cut off from my body, from the interconnection between me and all the many species that I eat, all the people who brought that food to me, the elements that nourish the plants and the animals. And And yeah, being so cut off from the pleasure of eating, because I too have been afraid of food almost my entire life.
Yeah. It's almost like a forbidden pleasure.
Yeah, if I'm feeling pleasure in eating something, it has to be bad for me in some way.
Mm. Oof. That is a core wound for women of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, uh, still very often will find myself thinking that thought.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yesterday I got blood labs back recently, and my ferritin is pretty low. I know iron is complicated,
Yeah.
and I'm learning about it, but the ferritin is pretty low, and it feeds into my other lab numbers and is giving me an overall picture. And so I was just reading about like high iron foods, and it's like dark chocolate, and I put it into Chronometer, and I was like, oh wow, that is holy shit. 2 little squares of my favorite chocolate bar a day is 15% of my daily iron needs. I'm like, can I do that? Is that like bad? What? And I'm like, well, yes, please. Jesus. I would love nothing more, actually. Get my iron and my chocolate at once.
Yeah. And enjoy food again. I think that we're, not to be a conspiracy theorist about it, but I almost feel that we're being deliberately confused with food, and it's being made to seem more complicated than it is. And I know part of that is just the mediums through which we're communicating now as humans. Like, you have to almost present this really crazy, out there, never heard this before idea. And that's actually like the fastest way to build trust with people.
Oh, like everyone thinks this is that.
Yeah,
But what
they're
if I
not
told
telling
you?
you.
Yeah.
It's funny, as a business owner and a clinic owner through the years, you kind of try out different strategies. And I definitely went through the phase where I was like, okay, we're going to flaunt our like cool knowledge. We're going to do posts about Klebsiella and Akkermansia. And we're really going to let people know what they don't know so that they know how much we do know. But then the people you reel in with that kind of bait, I guess. This sounds so toxic. This is just the reality of being a business owner. We all know about it. But you're pulling people in who actually don't want to do the most fundamental, basic things. And they're, very much in their heads, and they want to think their way out of the situation. They want it to be a one root cause, one magic bullet that solves all the problems. Yeah. And there's pressure. I'd be so interested in talking to other practitioners about this too. This pressure to always be on to the next thing, the cutting edge, like the new biohack, the new tool, the new test. But meanwhile, what we're interfacing with is a biology that hasn't changed one bit. Like, there isn't actually anything different or remarkable whatsoever. We really just need to get back to those fundamental inputs. And food is the biggest one. It's the most important thing. And I really believe, based on what I have observed clinically, that 90% of the people who are out here spending money and getting all this, functional testing, advanced level stuff done, wouldn't even have to be doing that if their basic nutrition needs were just met. And then those are the people that think their case is too complex for that. They're like, I don't want that fluffy stuff. I don't want to eat food and go outside, Ashley. I want to get a custom blended probiotic from a compounding pharmacy or a fecal transplant or whatever else it might be. But it really comes down to that feeling of safety in the body that can only come when we're properly nourished and enjoying that nourishment. And then you're almost like bulletproof because you're happy and you're well fueled and you're warm, and like you're no longer a candidate to be sold to. You're no longer going to buy into whatever is being hawked out on the metaverse. And that's where I just think like maybe there's a concerted effort to keep women out of that state, because then we're not going to buy stuff. We're going to go lay in the grass with our babies.
Yeah, and just buy like normal food at the grocery store.
Yeah, I literally just launched a free guide that actually uses those exact words. Like, this is how you eat with normal food that you can get at any store on any budget. Like, this is not more complicated. And honestly, my clinical work would be easier if every single person who comes to me one-on-one would actually just do this guide first and like already be eating enough by the time they get to me. But that's exactly it. It's just eat normal food from the normal store.
Yeah, I feel like our hearts are really in the same place. And because I have women reach out to me being like, oh my gosh, I can't. What am I? So I'm supposed to eat, it has to be grass fed. And then I have to do,
Yeah.
and I'm like, just eat, just go to the store and eat, buy food within your budget and eat it. And I also want to say to you, Ashley, that your posts they feel safe. They give me a feeling of safety.
Mm,
They do give, health knowledge and health advice, and sometimes it's somewhat complex, grounded in biochemistry. So some of the posts, some are less, but all of them are presented in a way that really makes me feel like, okay, I'm safe. This is doable. It does not trigger that fear. There's more I could be doing. What am I missing? What am I doing? What do I have to buy?
yeah.
Feeling it all.
Oh, thank you for saying that because the amount of effort that has gone into creating that's actually what I think about when I'm writing my posts is not how can I make a sale. I had a baby last year. I took a break and through that time, I really still wanted to show up and serve in a way that like I didn't have anything to sell. There's nothing I can say other than get on my wait list. But I really believe that there is good to be done with these tools. And I know that they're complicated and I know that there's a lot of horrible stuff happening on social media and with AI and everything. But I see so many people just being more confused and afraid because of the health information that they're intaking through these platforms. And it actually matters greatly to me to continue showing up in a way that is not feeding more into that. So thank you so much for seeing that.
Yeah. And I mean, this brings me to a question I specifically had written out, and it just sort of already encapsulates what we've talked about so far. But in light of that, like, how does an undernourished body change the way someone experiences stress?
Yeah. It's the undernourishment is the foundation of the stress, right? So we are constantly interacting with our environment. Um, we've got these like sensory gating channels. We've got our perception. Two people can walk into the exact same room and have vastly different interpretations of what's going on there, right? And when you're depleted because of undernourishment, you are wired to pick up every single threat. That's where that HSP part comes back in, right? You're even just sounds, right? If you hear things more clearly because you are living in a body that thinks, well, maybe she's not going outside to get the berries because there's like a bear. And maybe if we heighten her auditory perception, she'll be able to hear if the bear gets close to the cave. Like we're working with old, ancient hardware here. And it doesn't understand that you're actually choosing not to eat or you don't know that you're supposed to eat. And, we're going into these situations having completely different experiences. There's also, and I want to hold space for the very real physiological impact of stresses and traumas that we don't have control over and that are not self-inflicted, and how that is so metabolically expensive in the body and causes us to burn through nutrients. So perhaps someone who really is making an effort to eat enough, but is coming from a place where they were born depleted, perhaps they had a particularly traumatic childhood or have just gone through something really challenging, we will burn through our nutrients faster. So for anyone listening who maybe doesn't feel always super in control of the stress that you're under, there's extra care to be taken there. And I would say that that's even a better argument towards increasing the amount of food that you're eating, like really, really nourishing yourself, because your spend, going back to that salary analogy, like your spend is higher just as you're working through the normal stuff that's going on in your mind every day or the trauma that needs to be processed. But if you don't have any of that or less of that you're carrying around with you, undernourishing puts you into that trauma state. So you're kind of walking around in that state in a way that is a little bit more, to say it kindly, like self-inflicted, which is actually to be hopeful in that you can get yourself out of it because this wasn't inflicted onto you. And the way out is through nourishment.
Yeah. So an undernourished body is perceiving the environment as a threat at all times.
Yeah. I did that post about calcium that you had referenced. That's a really great example that I like to use. So calcium is sort of, we can think of an eggshell. It's this boundary mineral. It's this protector mineral in the nervous system. And when you either don't have adequate calcium in the right places because of undernourishment, or it can also happen because of, I'll often use the analogy like women who grew up in an eggshell home, like you're walking on eggshells, you didn't feel safe in your home, like you primed your body to actually keep those boundaries low because it was protective to you. And physiologically, we see that mirrored. And
What do you mean by keep those boundaries low?
Like keep the cellular calcium low. So instead of having enough of the adequate amount of calcium that your body needs to buffer stress and keep you feeling kind of grounded and calm, it's a very calming mineral. When I'm looking at the HTMA of somebody who has a really long trauma history, it'll usually go one of two ways. Either their calcium is very, very low, and in that you can see the person who is just so highly sensitive and so aware of everything. And, those are the people that are, you resonate with that.
That was me. My calcium was extremely low when I first started doing HTMA.
So you know what it feels like. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes hard to explain, but if you have the embodied understanding of it,
you're porous is how
yes. I always use what I say to my clients when I get an HTMA back like that. I say, like, imagine that you're an egg and you've been dropped into an acid bath, and all of that calcium around you that's there to protect you has been dissolved. And now you've just got this thin membrane protecting what's inside. And I don't need to usually explain beyond that. They instantly get it. They're like, yes, right? And then on the flip side, trauma can also show up as too much boundary. And then we'll see calcium really, really high. And those people will usually tell me they feel really depressed. They feel numbed out. Those are the women who aren't telling me I feel so reactive to every single thing. Those are the women who are telling me I don't even know how I feel. Like, I'm not even sure that I can access that. There's this big wall in between the feeling and the experience of the feeling because there was a protection put into place. And this is where, nourishment and my toolbox is one part of what's important on the healing journey. And the other part is actually bringing in, whether it's, good psychotherapy support or whatever is needed to actually complement, so that when the feelings come up, because if we start breaking up that calcium, feelings come up. And if you're not safe to access and feel those and you don't have tools to do that, then your body responds with just putting the calcium right back. And if your calcium is chronically really low and you're overstimulated and you're responding to every single thing with your full physiological response, like the sound of the car horn outside because someone's car alarm went off, like your body is responding to that as if someone is breaking into your home. All the same hormones getting you ready to run, your digestion shutting down, all of that. So if you can't get a handle on whatever psychological tools might be helpful to you in that case, to put some space in between the stimulus and your response to it, it doesn't matter how much food we put into your body, you're going to be burning through it faster than you can retain it. So I always like to emphasize the importance of coming at this from both sides, where we need to eat enough, and that's foundational. But we also do need to be adequately supported, whether that's through our community or through professionals. We can't just focus on our bodies and forget that our brains are part of our bodies. On either side, you also can't just do therapy and never eat, right? Do ayahuasca journeys and never eat. So I do think there's an important place for both of those when we're talking about how nourishment affects how we respond to stress.
I'm so happy to share that I'll be returning to Costa Rica this November to host another women's retreat. The last time a small group of Medicine Stories listeners gathered there was truly magical. The women who came and the moments we shared have stayed with me ever since. I think of each of them often and appreciate our ongoing connections. 2 of them, at least so far, will be joining us again this year. The upcoming retreat is in a new part of the country and will be shaped by hot springs, waterfalls, incredible food, and the deep contentment that comes from being together in a beautiful living landscape. We'll spend 6 days in the rainforest, soaking in mineral-rich waters, resting, exploring, and reconnecting with ourselves, with nature, and with each other. And I'll be joined again by friend of the podcast and repeat guest, Dr. Susie Hazen, who brings so much warmth and care to the experience. If you feel the pull to join us, you can learn more at the link in the show notes. I would truly love to meet you there. To me, I tend to orient from the other way, like you just acknowledged, it's both, but because I see so many people doing therapy for 10, 15 years and not getting very far. Like, what if you were also eating enough and nourishing? I was looking at, you have a post on potassium that I was looking at this morning, and the way you were describing being in a low potassium state, I was like, oh, this sounds so much like my dear friend, mother of 3, who is having a really hard time. And then she had actually sent me her HTMA, so I went back and looked at it, and I was like, oh, yep, her potassium is like at the very bottom on that graph, and then her calcium and magnesium are through the roof. And then I was looking at your calcium post, and you show a screenshot of someone's HTMA that looks just like hers does. And what you are describing here is exactly how she feels, that numbness. She's like, I just appreciate so much how there actually is a direct correlation between our nutrient levels and how we feel and what we experience.
Yeah. HTMA. This is actually what got me into HTMA. I used to think it was just this woo-woo nonsense tool because, we're definitely told that in the more conventional space, like, oh, well, there's no correlation between blood levels and what comes up in a hair test, so therefore it's not accurate. And then I got one, like the lab gave it to me for free or something because they wanted me to, use it in my clinic. And I was like, I would never use this. But I did it. So I sent my sample in, and my copper came back extremely high. And I'm the daughter of someone who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And because of that, and because of my own research deep dives, I knew that there was a correlation between schizophrenia and copper in the literature. So it kind of got me interested in HTMA. And then I went and took every single HTMA course that I could find. And it's now the primary tool that I use. And I can look at someone's HTMA and not even read their intake form and know how they feel. I can look at, probably, as you were saying, your results, probably kind of like that flat line calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium picture. And I know that this is a person who is really struggling with overstimulation. And I can look at somebody who, like your friend, has that high cal mag, more like calcium shell pattern. And I know, okay, this is a person that's feeling really numb. And it's actually such helpful context, because now I know who I'm talking to without having to spend 8 sessions together. And I don't have any psych training. I don't know how to really interpret, but just from looking at someone's chart, I can say, oh, I know how you're feeling. So I know that, you, Amber, probably are going to need really simple, easy steps to take, not overcomplicate it. You're going to get thrown into overthinking if, we're making this too complicated. So how can we make it low-hanging fruit? Do these 3 things. You're going to feel so much better. And then we're going to have your buy-in, and then we can take you a little further. Whereas the calcium shell pattern people, I tend to approach a little bit differently because they're just feeling a little bit differently, right? They need something a little bit more to get them to kind of come and pull them in, because they're not such a live wire from the nervous system perspective as they are. Anyway, it is such an incredible tool for being able to really highlight, oh, okay, this is how it feels to be in this person's body without having to be in that person's body.
Yeah. I mean, every time I've had my HTMA read, I'm just like, well, you know more about me than the people who I live with. You got me on a psychological and spiritual level in a way that even the people I'm constantly narrating my lived experience to don't quite get.
Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing tool. Have you seen, so if have you done a couple of
Yeah.
HTMAs? Like, have you experienced seeing those changes alongside the changes that you're feeling in your body?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
very much. And then I haven't done one for a year and a half, but I just did one last week. So I'm really curious to see where I'm at now.
exciting.
Okay, before we close and then jump over to Patreon, I'm just obsessed with with what women hand down to our daughters
Mm.
and with the whole process of pregnancy, of postpartum, of living in the home with our mothers and watching what they eat or don't. I remember years ago I was posting about, I like to joke that I was the original ex-vegan influencer because I stopped being vegan in 2007 and started writing and sharing about it on my blog and my MySpace back then. And so anyway, I was posting about that a few years ago, and so many women in the comments were like, my mom, look, now that you're saying this, she was constantly in a bad mood. She was constantly, and she never ate. She just smoked more cigarettes so she could eat less, so she could be skinnier. And anyway, my point is that I don't know, I'm just obsessed with thinking about like maternal inheritance of nutrients, and how that affects us. And so you have this post that I just think every pregnant and breastfeeding woman and the people who love her should know that a mother's body uses 4 pounds of minerals to build her baby. Each pregnancy depletes about 10% of a mother's total mineral reserves. 1 year of breastfeeding takes 164,000 extra calories, and it takes a mother's body about 3 years to replenish after birth.
Yeah, it's powerful when you see it all laid out like that.
Yes.
I know. And the thing that I think really, but when I wrote that, I actually didn't even realize this. And I wish maybe I should just go back and edit it or do another post. So with the breastfeeding caloric expenditure, when I was in school learning nutrition, we're taught what women need to eat when they're breastfeeding and that there's an increase in calories for breastfeeding. And I have actually recently revisited those numbers and that research. And I was talking to a colleague about it. And I was like, wait, is this right? Like, I feel like this isn't right. All of those numbers are based on the assumption that women are eating in a caloric deficit to lose weight postpartum. So when women are being presented with the amount of calories that they need to eat during breastfeeding, that's actually already, like, the government has decided that weight loss is so important that they're presenting the number. Yeah.
They're like,
They're
hey,
presenting the
fatty,
number
you
based
got
on
to
that.
cut down on your calories while you're breastfeeding because it's time to get your pre-baby body back.
Yeah, so there's actually this like little caveat on the NHS website when it explains breastfeeding nutrition and how many calories you need to be intaking, that says like, oh, but also if you're not trying to lose weight, you need to add like 600 calories to this because we've already done that subtraction for you. So there's just such bad information out there. So women are looking at that number and then they're doing their own, well, I want to lose weight. So they're subtracting, and the amount of postpartum depletion that I'm seeing in women who breastfed through like what I can only describe as severe malnutrition. And that sounds hysterical, but that's what's happening is mothers during the time of their life when they are fueling and nourishing the next generation and handing down this health inheritance, we're putting them in the most severely depleted and undernourished state that they're going to be in their entire lifespan. And that is just criminal. It makes you shake your head. Like, how is this happening?
That is crazy. I cannot believe the anger that learning that just brought up in me. That, I mean, the way our culture, especially for women,
Yeah.
overrides physiological, biological reality and needs to meet a cultural standard of beauty.
Yeah. And everything. Like, that's actually the fundamental basis of all of it, which I have realized in becoming a mother myself in a way that I never realized before, because I knew that we were being, pressured not to eat so that we can be attractive, and pressured to like whatever, buy makeup and dye our hair and do all these toxic things to our bodies to maintain this cultural beauty standard. And then I had a baby and I realized like there are layers to this. And if we can't get it right with mother baby, we're never going to get it right anywhere. Like this is the seed, this is the fundamental crack. And if we can't fix this, we actually can't fix anything. So it's where I dedicate all of my energy now, because we're not just telling women not to eat to be pretty. We're also telling mothers not to respond to their babies crying. We're telling mothers not to access the oxytocin and the restorative sleep that they can gain through sleeping like a normal mammal with their baby, right? We're depriving mothers of oxytocin and pushing them into sleep deprivation, because like babies can't sleep without their mothers. That's insane. So now mothers are staying up all night rocking their babies until they've put them down, and then they're waking back up, and also they're not eating. And also, even if they are eating, they're eating too little because the government is telling them a caloric value that isn't representative of them being in a deficit already. And then, we're separating them from their babies to go back to work, or even here in Canada, where we have an incredible, 12 months of paid mat leave. As a mother of a 1-year-old, also like 1-year-old is too little to separate from your baby into daycare. Like the thought of that actually makes me sweat and feel uncomfortable. And that's many women's reality. So even just the tolerating of that stress, it's just when you said that, like we're asking women to override their biological needs. That's really it. That's really what it boils down to. And that's why all the women are not doing well. And if we can just get enough fuel in to all collectively realize this, like mothers, like get your matches, like we need to burn this down, but we can't do that if we're all like needing to take a nap because we're starving to death. So we need to eat.
Yeah. I mean, your mother baby is the crucible. And if we cannot, as a collective humanity, come together to at least protect that bubble of time, what
there is nothing. Like, how do you finish that sentence? Like, if we can't do that, we literally can't do anything. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And then when you're a mother and it's all you see, and you still have to show up in the world as a human, it's difficult. But I do think it's important to remember what we're fighting for.
Well, let's start with encouraging and calming mothers who are listening right now, like the women who message you saying, but I don't have time. But it can be a banana. It can just whatever simple food you can eat, just eat. You don't overthink it. This is still where I am unlearning so much in my own mind of just not overthinking eating.
Yeah, you don't have to go make the like cauliflower version of whatever carbohydrates you actually want to eat. In fact, you will be so much better served from eating those carbohydrates. Carbohydrates alone can really get your body through some micronutrient deficiencies, right? It's raw energy. So if you give your body that, you don't need to be as stressed out about getting the perfect, minerals and vitamins and everything. If you're not eating enough carbohydrates, you're going to feel terrible. So a banana is actually a perfect example of something that someone could go grab as a snack and kind of immediately feel better. I think a lot of women, if you just gave them a banana and like a glass of electrolytes, they would wake up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great thing about a banana is that I've just gotten into bananas in the last few weeks. You can very easily add things to it or put it on a rice cake or a piece of bread or whatever, honey, bee pollen, any kind of nut butter, like just it's right there and it's so easy.
Every afternoon, that's my snack with my daughter. We'll like eat some banana and some avocado together. We eat it on the floor. The other day I was sitting there and she had finished eating, but I hadn't, because I put my banana on like 2 pieces of toast with, all the goodies. And she was just kind of like mashing avocado into my hair. And I thought about getting up to stop it. But in that moment, I just thought, you know what? The most important thing right now is me eating. And that's just really that simple to me. But it was also a good reflection for like, oh, maybe this is where other mothers need to be reminded that like it's okay if your kid's making a huge mess while you eat, because you eating is actually the most important thing happening in that moment. So maybe I should tell this story later.
Yeah, and then when I think about an underfueled mother, and that position. I feel like we're constantly trying to stave off catastrophe because our bodies feel like, oh, catastrophe's coming. So like me and my postpartum with, especially my youngest, even though I was vegan with my oldest, I still had more nutrient stores in me than I did 10 years later with my youngest. So I had a harder time with her. But I would have been like, stop, no, okay, let me get this avocado out of my hair before there's any more in my hair. And then let me like, clean up right now because then I don't have to clean up later. It's like constantly trying to mitigate future stress, but actually stressing myself out in the moment more by behaving that way. And especially if I'm giving up eating in order to clean.
Yeah. And then a lot of women aren't even sitting down to have the snack with their kid in the first place because they're taking that opportunity to, I'm not saying other things are not worth doing. It's not fun to have a sink full of dishes, but like I'd rather have a sink full of dishes than an empty stomach or low blood sugar. So you gotta pick your battles in motherhood.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I'm also okay with like eating my rice cake with banana on it while I wipe down the counter. It's not ideal, but if that's what's happening right there, at least I'm eating.
Yeah, I do always say that. Like, it's great if you can sit down and chew and not be multitasking. But if you can't, still eat anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ashley, I'm so glad to have connected with you. I'm so glad that post popped up on my feed. And, it's a gamble when you love someone's writings and how they are on the internet and then actually having them on your podcast because not everyone is articulate and lovely. And I'm just so happy that we did this.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. I was a little bit nervous because I actually love this podcast and it's a little intimidating to have a conversation with someone for the first time that then is probably going to be listened to by like everyone you like. So hopefully something of value came through.
And it'll be listened to by women who need to hear it, So thank you so much. And let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm kind of coming out of a year of postpartum, and I feel like my work is a little bit in a transition state, but maybe we always are. So the best place to connect with me is on Instagram right now at Ashley Wulkan, and I've got some good stuff there. I've got a free guide if you're just getting started with this whole eating enough conversation and not sure exactly what that looks like and don't want it to be overcomplicated. I have kind of a step-by-step, like, here's just how much to eat. Here are your kind of macro mineral targets, where I think that if every single woman did that for a year, by the time they got to me and did an HTMA, things would be looking a lot better. So if that's a resource that would be helpful for you, I can send you that link, Amber, if you want to put that somewhere. And then otherwise, yeah, if you have questions or want to connect further, want to do testing, Instagram is the best place to find me.
So you are currently doing HTMA, or is it?
I am currently doing HTMAs. I have a wait list, so it's a little bit of time in between when you're going to sign up for that and when you're going to actually be doing some testing. But I think the medicine is just in going slow. So even though there is a part of me that actually has a really hard time not allowing urgency to creep in around that, I want to model that for my clients, that sometimes it's okay. Take a break. It's not like you have no steps. You've got that free guide. And if I could give any gift to someone, it would be actually to just follow those steps before they get into the world of testing and functional medicine, because I'd rather you do it before you spend the money and I tell you that that's what you need to do. So come in with your fundamentals tended to, and then you can go deeper.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank you, Amber. This was lovely.
Okay, so much more is talked about in the extended Patreon conversation. Ashley and I get just more personal, talking about our own families and our parents.
The mother who's just kind of under eating, she's not getting hospitalized, her body's still doing okay, her thyroid's down regulating, like her body's slowly shutting down, but she's still functional and she's still having babies. Maybe those babies aren't going to be immediately very sick, but we're not handing them a good inheritance to walk with.
And what is more important to me is being a well-nourished woman so that I can live into my grandmother years and beyond, so that I can support my daughters when they have babies. And I tell them both this, like, I'll be there. I don't want you to go through what I went through. I don't want you to go through what most women go through. I'm gonna, if at all possible, be there to help you.
Yeah. And be strong and healthy.
Yes.
When you consider just the stress that women carry in their own bodies changing and what that means for their value in society, and that program is constantly running in the background on top of everything else. Like, it's already stressful enough to be a human, and then we add that on top of it, and then you can see it when you look at their HTMAs, when you look at the types of illnesses that women are getting later in life. It's like the body is cannibalizing itself and breaking down its own tissues and like rearranging them in this incredibly pathological way, because we haven't accepted ourselves and we're constantly trying to get back to this like 20-year-old version of us. It's haunting.
I'm really grateful to her for opening up. And I loved, it turns out she's been a listener of this podcast for a long time and is a deep listener. So she remembered a lot of the things that I've shared about myself over the years, and actually asked me some really amazing questions. When I listened back, I was like, oh, I talked maybe more than usual about myself, whereas I had wanted to hear more about her. But perhaps she can come back in the future. I would love that. And we can talk more and more about this. I just love hearing people's family stories, and especially as they tie in to nourishment and health and well-being. And I'm also really thinking in my mind, tying this conversation into what I talked about with Cammie McBride a few months ago on first blood and lost rites of passage, and how so many of the undernourished people in our culture are teenage girls, and how teenage girls are going through their first blood, their menarche, from a state of depletion. I mean, you know, we talked a lot in this episode and on Patreon about motherhood and mothers being depleted, but I just have such a heart for these young girls who are just moving into their fertile years and into womanhood and are already in a depleted state. And again, that was me becoming vegetarian at age 12. Like, I was so unwell through all those years, and no one knew. No one in my life had this perspective and had this framework. And that's why I never thought about food as being something that nourishes me, but only as being something that, one, makes me not hungry, and then two, is possibly very bad for me. So of course, I had a hard time hormonally during those years. I had some very hard times, and then, you know, moving into my adult life as well. And anyway, I'm just saying to my fellow mothers of young girls or girls who are currently teenagers, think about this. Think about this in relation to their menstrual cycle and to their hormonal well-being. And as I've talked about before, as Ashley and I talk about in the outro, as I came to realize in the last year that my oldest daughter, who's 19 now, lived at home, I need to teach her what nourishment really means and looks like, and how to feed herself before she goes out on her own. Because I was an absolute mess when I left home, having no idea how to feed myself. And that's when the undereating really, really, really started, because preparing food was just such a burden for me. It was such a burden. I was so confused about what to eat, even back then, that I just ended up eating very little. And that wasn't the intention, but it was what happened. So I'm going to keep having these conversations. Love having these conversations. Thank you for tuning in. And Patreon, mythicmedicine.shop for our herbal medicines to nurture and nourish your nervous systems. Lovely, sweet women and mothers out there. It's just doing it for us, doing it for our daughters, doing it for the future. Let's Let's keep talking about it and let's keep nourishing.